Welcome to the Wesleyan Diaspora Network, hosted by Reverend Adam Jones, Global Partners. Today's topic, practical ways to serve diaspora peoples.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Justin. As I said before, our family, we lived overseas for several years. And I think that's where it really, I guess if you want to use the phrase, pick the scab for wanting to reach diaspora, was the fact that when we lived overseas, there were so many people who adopted us and grabbed us and helped us walk through the process. As we resettled then back into our home country of the United States, we realized that we had an opportunity to be able to adopt others and walk them through just the transitions that they had in resettling. So working with diasporas is really near and dear and important to us. Our current city is completely different than the context in which we lived in. As I said before, our city is about 100,000 people. About 60% are of Arab descent, and about 35, I would say probably 35% of that 60 are foreign born, which means we are truly an international city. It's a very unique place. But we found that even as we moved here with so much infrastructure that's set up for people from an Arab background, people were still in need of assistance, someone to walk through life, walk through the process, walk through the system with them. And we just found that this was a perfect opportunity for us to, and Joshua, I loved your question and your insight, because sometimes it can feel quite overwhelming of knowing where to begin. And really sometimes when you do enter into that world, man, there is a flood that can happen, either a flood of people or a flood of needs, whatever it might be, and it can feel quite intimidating. However, what we found is that the times that we have jumped in to do that, the Lord has given us strength and energy that we didn't think we had. He's given us really good boundaries to be able to say, this is not something that I can do, and some wisdom and discernment along the way. And so this is where, again, to use the expression, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I would just say, just to go back to that original question, is to lean into some of those fears. They are certainly valid. Lean into them a little bit and really allow the Lord to speak into them. One of the other reasons that working with diasporas and working primarily in teaching and training, why it's so important to me is when we moved here in 2017, it was not too long after President Trump enacted the travel ban. And because of most of our community is made up of people from those countries that were on that ban, we found a lot of resettlement that was happening in our city were people who were moving from other cities in the United States and in North America. And we would ask them, well, okay, why did you relocate here? Of course, being able to connect with someone close to them, a family member, whatever, the language was helpful. But the primary reason is that where they were resettled, they had no one there on the other side who was walking them through the process or helping them. And so we found, okay, if part of our mission, our role here is to not only help those who live in Dearborn, that's super important, but how can we also help train and equip those who are not in Dearborn to help out with those who have been relocated in their area? And so this is why I'm thankful that Justin asked me to be a part of this call. Just a couple of kind of qualifiers before I get too far into this. Our primary context is working with people from the Middle East. Okay, so we work with Arabs, Afghans. That is maybe different from your context. Our primary people that we work with are also Muslims, and that is also a completely different context, maybe from what you guys may be working with. And so I just know that I'm coming from that background, and our city is coming from that context. Our city is also interesting, as I said, because we are statistically, being a white Protestant evangelical Christian, we are a minority in our city. However, we still hold a lot of power in people's eyes. And so I try not to ignore that. When we first stepped in, it was kind of like, hey, we're coming into your community. And they were like, no, we're coming into your country. And we found that there was a little bit of a power dynamic and shuffle that we had to at least acknowledge. And so I've tried to enter into our community, realizing that in some people's eyes, I hold kind of the power as a middle-aged white guy. However, I also realize that I'm in a minority in worldview, and so I try to hold those things in tension. The last thing I just want to add as we jump into to the rest of our time together is that not all diaspora people are the same. Okay, whether it's their background, we found that even people from the same village in the middle of nowhere, Yemen, depending on when their family arrived, how long they've been here, what was their education status, what was the group that they were connected to, all those pieces, those little variables change things along the way. Okay, so not all, it's not one size fits all. And I actually enjoy that. Once I kind of figured that out, then it became a thing of discovery. What can I discover then about this person that I'm with? But I would just offer that as we continue on this conversation, we all have this kind of muse maybe in our minds. It's this person or this group, but it's not going to be that all diaspora people are the same. Okay, so Justin beautifully laid out just the biblical argument for reaching out to diaspora people. And I want to continue the conversation in talking about how we practically do so. Next week, we're going to talk about hospitality and the art of welcoming in and building relationships. And in future sessions, we're going to talk about how to share the gospel and how to partner together to reach diaspora people. And so today will feel a little more kind of utilitarian. It's going to be a little bit more of just some tips of how to build these genuine relationships with people and kind of where to start. So I want to look at just a few different things. First of all, how to connect with diaspora people. Again, I'm going to try to fill up. We've got about 15 minutes of content. Actually, I've got 30 minutes of content, but I'm going to fit it into 15. All right. And I'm not going to get off track. I've got like the ADD brain. You guys are all looking at me, the ones who have eyes on. I'm going to try to stay on track, but this will kind of be just like bullet point tips of stuff that we've learned along the way. What I hope happens from this is that it generates more conversation, whether it's via Facebook or even in the chat, but it will feel a little bit like choo, 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 choo. And that's the way my brain works. So I apologize. So anyway, so some tips on how to connect with diaspora people. A lot of times we get that question like, well, where do you start? And I think the first thing we always tell people is to be intentional. Be intentional with that. Start with the known markets and shops in your area where people from other cultures or other countries might go or own or work at. Okay, and that is, we try to coach people that you can't be intentional all the time. Sometimes you just got to go to your market, your shop, because you got to get your thing. But there are moments where you can be intentional. I'm going to choose to drive to the other side of town to go to this market or this shop because I want to start connecting with someone who maybe was not born here or is connected to others who are not born here. So be intentional. We also tell people be inquisitive. Okay, ask genuine questions. Now, we always caution people, don't be creepy, right? So like, this is not a date. And this is not interrogation. This is a chance to genuinely get to know someone. All right. And some of that starts with just that internal motivation that we have. Like, do I really want to have a genuine connection with this person? This is not transactional. This is meant to be a genuine connection with people. So be inquisitive. Ask questions. Maybe some of those entry-level questions are, you know what? Hi, what's your name? Oh, wow. It's a crazy, easy question, but what's your name? I think what I'm finding being growing up in the U.S. is that, you know, a lot of times me and my friends, whoever, were named just by random, it seems like. But other cultures, people's names have very specific meanings. And we've always found that not only asking what someone's name is, but what does it mean? Where does that come from? Is anyone else in your family named that? It's a way to get to know someone, and maybe in a meaningful way. Maybe that next level of curiosity is as you've gotten to know someone, as you've connected with them, maybe you've been to the same market a few times, you've gotten to see the same person over and over, is, hey, what do you miss about home? That's a really important question for diaspora people because they may not have many people who are asking them, what do you miss about your home? You know, I've never been to X country or X city or X area of the world. Tell me about it. What should I know that I don't know about? I think there's even deeper questions as you get to know someone where you can ask, uh, what is the hardest thing about living here? And sometimes you'd be surprised. Sometimes the hardest thing about living here is like, oh, I hate the way the people drive, or I don't know where to shop. Or sometimes the hardest thing is like, I feel like I'm in between two worlds. Like I go home and I live in this world, and I go to school and I live in this world. But what we're wanting to do is create opportunity to connect with someone and give them space just to open up and process at their pace. And that's our goal. So be intentional, be inquisitive, be patient. Building trust takes time. Okay, again, this is not transactional. We're talking about being genuine. Just be patient. Be faithful to keep showing up. That is a mantra that we use over and over and over with our work here, is to be faithful, to keep showing up in people's lives. And that takes a lot of patience. Be flexible as well. Many cultures, the definition of pace, the definition of time is a lot different than ours. Okay, so be willing to flex a little bit when it comes to pace, when it comes to time, when it comes to some of those cultural differences. The idea is that we will begin connecting with people who are diaspora people. And I think what we found in that, and this is going back to one of the questions earlier, but and one of the concerns earlier, is that we found that in connecting with a few, it typically opens and unlocks many, many, many doors. Okay, so that's just something to be aware of. If you take the time to build those genuine relationships and become a very safe and genuine person to our friends, it's going to unlock many, many other opportunities to be a blessing. Okay, so that's just a basic kind of where to begin, how to start. But I also want to look at how do you identify some of the needs and barriers, is what I really like to call them, to healthy living for diaspora people. As I said before, even though we live in a very unique city, we still have a lot of built-in social and systemic knowledge that we're able to utilize to help our diaspora friends navigate through life here. And so I just want to take a moment to unpack just some of the systemic barriers that we found to healthy living for some of our friends. What are some of the physical barriers that people face? And then even some of the personal barriers as well. So the systemic barriers, these tend to be a lot more just for us, we would say, practical stuff. But education is a really big one. Education is a big one. Okay, so regardless of how diaspora people have ended up in your area, whether they're refugees, whether they're immigrants, whether they have just moved there for whatever reason, helping people with families navigate the education system is pretty important. Okay, I get like 65 different text messages from 5 different apps from our 4 different kids on what assignment is supposed to be here, what they're supposed to be doing for that. And I grew up in the United States. So someone coming from another country or culture may just need some coaching or assistance in working through the education system, signing up for school, even making sure that you're in the right school district. We have found in our context, because a lot of our friends are refugees who are being resettled, they have an agency who takes care of all of that for them. And that agency does not necessarily work efficiently. And so they have been registered for schools that are not in our school district because they're trying to group people together as easily as they can to get to process the paperwork. And so we've had to sit down and kind of walk through the system with people. Helping people through documentation. Okay, what paperwork are they lacking that can help them out here for this opportunity or that? IDs, driver's license. And this is not a conversation about legality, what's your paperwork and getting here, show me all your visas. And this is a conversation about how can we help you settle in the place that the Lord has brought you. Okay, healthcare is another huge one. Now in the U.S., our friends up to the north, you guys can, turn me off for just a little bit because you guys don't have to deal with this in the same way. But for me, like going through the phone tree to contact my insurance company or trying to even just connect with my doctor, like it is frustrating for me. And so how can I expect someone who has just resettled in the area to have any more luck or understanding in going through the system? I remember when we first moved to Bosnia, we had an issue where we had to go to the emergency room. And at that point, I didn't realize that to get through the emergency room, the one who kind of left the biggest tip got to the front of the room. Well, that doesn't happen in the U.S., right? You show up to the ER and you're just like, I guess you're throwing out hundreds of dollars. That doesn't get you to the system any faster. And so people might be coming from a different background of how do I get up to the top of the line? I'm going to throw some money. How do I get out of the speeding ticket? I'm going to throw some money. Well, slow down. Let's walk you through the process a little bit. Some other needs are or potential barriers, and Justin mentioned this earlier, but it's jobs and training. What skills is this person bringing in with them that we could easily set them up with an opportunity in Canada or the U.S.? What skills are they lacking that we could easily connect them with and get some training for so that they could find a good job in which they can provide for themselves or for their family, okay? But also just some other questions of like, how did they even end up here in the beginning? As I said before, a lot of our refugee friends, they're coming through agencies and they're going to take care of stuff for this amount of time. But what about the long term? Who's kind of walking through and working through with them in the long term? And some of our friends, they're connected with other people from their village or extended family. But advice and good advice, there's a huge difference between the two. So just really connecting with people and making sure that they're getting good advice for these things. So just a few tips to add on to just some of those systemic barriers that people might face is over communicate. Assume nothing is innately understood. This does not mean that our friends are uneducated. It just means that maybe we need to make sure we are clear that we are using the same words and we have the same definitions for those words. So let's over communicate with our friends and over explain. I can't tell you how many meetings that I've been called into where my friends, they speak English so well, but they want me there to make sure that they're catching all of the nuanced language that they may not understand, because we will leave that time going, okay, we have the same words, we have the same understanding definitions for it. Over communicate with the agencies and other groups that you're working with. One of my favorite stories was we helped an Afghan family get registered for school. They came over about 5 years ago, and none of their kids were registered for school. So we set them up with the Dearborn public school system. And what we did not realize is that their resettlement agency had already done so. They didn't communicate to us. We didn't communicate with them. And so the first day of school, a bus shows up in front of their house. The girls get on the bus and they start driving. And the bus drives 45 minutes away. They get off the bus and they're in a completely different city. They're at a charter school that the resettlement agency signed them up for. And they're calling me going, Mr. Adam, we're 45 minutes away. We don't know where we are. I thought we were supposed to go to the school in Dearborn. That was their first day of school in the United States because I failed to over communicate, make sure the agency did not already sign them up for something, that we did not deregister them from the other school. So there are lots of challenges in that, but over communicate. Have lists available. Do the prep work now. Have lists available for the clinics that you know that offer low cost or free healthcare. Have a list of ESL programs that are close by. Joshua, you talk about that vast need. Sometimes we certainly can't provide for all those needs. But what we can do is do some of the legwork to say, okay, here's a great place that you can go. Here's a vetted ESL program that I can get you plugged into. Here are some job resources. Here are some translators. Just if we take time to do that legwork on the front end, it really does help us help them well. Immigrant Connection is another Wesleyan-based service that is all over the United States, and even some of those sites can work remotely with clients. But this is a way to help diaspora people in a very tangible way through the immigration process, if that's one of the things that they are lacking. So having that list available really does make things more efficient. So those are some of the systemic needs. I'll kind of speed through the rest of these things here. The physical needs and barriers, those are other really important things, but housing seems to be always an issue for diaspora people. Okay, I guess I shouldn't say it. In our context, housing is always an issue. Affordable housing is always an issue. And being able to do the legwork of finding what are some good neighborhoods, who are some people who are renting, having those pieces available will really help you be a blessing to diaspora people. But not only housing, we found that when we moved back from Bosnia to the United States, we rented a house. The biggest difference between Bosnia and the United States was that all of our houses in Bosnia were furnished. We showed up here to rent a house and nothing was furnished. No couch, no lamp, no light bulbs, no shower curtain, nothing. So be willing and ready to not only find housing, but furnishings for people. Do you let them pick it out or do you go pick it out for them? These are some of the things that we have had to wrestle with along the way. Transportation. How are people getting from one place to the next? A lot of places that we visit around the world, public transportation is far superior than what we have in a lot of the suburbs in the United States. And so how people are going to get from job to job, place to place, school to school, have those questions, or at least answer those questions ready. Other ways that you can be a blessing to our diaspora friends is in language and culture acquisition. Okay, we just found that being cognizant of some of those cultural differences allows us then to help others navigate through some of those social and cultural differences from where they're coming from. Again, we're not talking about people who are uneducated. They're just new to a new culture. Okay. And I can't tell you how many times, even as we relocated to a small town in Eastern Europe, where I was like, what's the English equivalent? The blonde in every story, because I had no clue what I was doing. And it wasn't because I was uneducated, it's because I was new to a place. And so people sometimes just need that assistance as they navigate through that. Okay, you can't underestimate the importance of building trust and safety with people. And these are some really tangible ways, if you're providing and helping take care of them physically, that it's going to unlock trust. It will establish you as a safe person in your context. Okay, so those are some of those physical needs. The last one there. The last barrier I think is probably the most important. What are some of the personal barriers for people to live in healthy ways long term? The first barrier is simply you. And that sounds not very fun, but I can just tell you that working with diaspora people is not a fast, flash in the pan work. Okay, it is not always efficient. It's not always quick, and it's not always easy. And we, you, me, all of us can become so easily distracted. We become prisoners of the moment. We become easily excited at the moment. But it's hard. And our endurance sometimes does not keep up with the needs that people might have. And we've all been to that new coffee shop in our neighborhood that sells new drinks, and we love the newness of that new coffee shop. For us, like when we first moved here, there was no local coffee shops, just Tim Hortons and Starbucks. No offense to the Tim Hortons or Starbucks people, but we were looking for something local. And then all of a sudden, this Yemeni coffee shop opened up, and I was like, yes, finally something new. And after a while of every day having Yemeni coffee, there was just days where I missed the regular, the old, okay? And there would be days like that when working with diaspora people where it's just, we miss the regular and the old, right? So we can become easily distracted. We have short attention spans. But this work is worth it and it is important. So be willing and be ready for a long suffering with people as they navigate through their new world. But the last barrier I want to talk about is them. Diaspora people, if they've been resettled, if they've moved from their original, from a country they came from to a new location, they're going to come with some kind of loss, okay? Loss of normalcy, loss of routine, loss of something. And not always are people from those backgrounds are equipped to process grief and loss the way that we want them to. Okay, they're not going to be able to understand or put words to, or maybe they're not even been trained to be that self-aware or whatever. I don't know. I'm going to mess up the way I say it, but people coming from different cultural backgrounds may not process feelings or emotions the same way as us. Okay, but what we have to do is look for spaces to allow people to process that loss. Ask good questions. Remember, it's not an interrogation, but it's a chance to have a real connection with people. And the last thing I want to offer you is that you cannot fix every problem for people. Okay. In fact, the more that we can set others up to solve their own issues, the more established and confident they will become. Okay. We have 4 kids, 13 down to 5. And I think what we're trying to find is, like, we can't parent the youngest one the way that we parent the oldest one. We can't parent the oldest one the way that we parent the youngest one. However, what we're finding is that if we give them an appropriate amount of responsibility along the way, the idea is that they will grow to be independent and self-sufficient adults. Independent doesn't mean that they won't rely on each other. It just means that they have the tools to be able to navigate through the things that are challenging. They know when they don't know. They ask for help when they don't when they need it. But it's not something that we have to solve on our own for everyone. What we want is to be a true blessing in connecting with diaspora people. And we just found that many times this comes in the form of just very tangible ways. And the ways that we can help people comes with the ultimate goal of just making sure that they're healthy in all facets of their life. So I realize it's a little bit of a bullet point information, but just wanted to give you just some tips and some tricks in connecting with and assisting diaspora people. I'll turn it back over to Justin.
Thanks, Adam. I'm really grateful for the 10 really practical tips you've outlined. Anyone have questions for Adam on those suggestions and tips that he's shared? Because they're all really valuable.
Adam, I love what you were sharing specifically around the understanding of how valuable it is to be able to process and leave room for and ask the questions around emotion, and recognizing the space that's needed there. You know, as somebody who is, and I'm very interested in, I think we all should be students of emotion, emotional quotients, EQ, growing in those things. Do you have specific books or resources that would lend themselves to working through processing, how to identify and process emotion that wouldn't necessarily be culturally ours?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a growing resource list that Justin has been curating and putting together, but a few that I would immediately recommend, and I'm just going to look over because I was going to grab them if I could easily, but I can't. So Aaron Meyer, The Culture Map, is a great resource. It's not it's not necessarily a Christian book. It's more business based, but it lays out just, I think it's 12 different facets of culture, and where, generally speaking, many cultures fall on that spectrum. And it kind of helps you compare and contrast the way that maybe your passport culture interacts with people from other places. So that's one. Leading with Cultural Intelligence, which is David Livermore, is another good one that I will recommend. And then one from maybe strictly a Christian perspective is called The 3D Gospel. I call that a bathroom book because it's like 70 pages. You can read it in a few different sittings, if you will. But it's how the gospel speaks into these three dimensions of culture, and honor, shame, and fear, power, and guilt and innocence. And those are important resources because it helps us understand the lens in which we see things, and maybe the lens in which others may. Plus, they're great conversation starters. You're like, hey, I was reading a little bit about Sri Lanka. Have you found that to be true? Like, how does this concept, they're usually good conversations. Those are 3 that immediately come to mind.
And I would add one more by Sherwood Lingenfelter called Ministering Cross-Culturally. There's a helpful online survey you can take in there, which helps identify your own cultural sort of lenses through which you see the world, including emotions. And it also outlines contrasting cultural worldviews. And he, in that book, helps us to create some bridges for how we can cross some of those divides that we experience. Other questions, comments for Adam on the practical tips he's provided?
I have a question, and you can answer this later. I know we are short of time. As a pastor, one of the things which I've realized is trying to balance working with your current congregation as well as meeting the demands of the sudden influx of new immigrants coming into the country and helping them out. How do we balance it? I mean, it's a broad question, because I also realize there's a lot of time, physical energy that needs to go into the new migrants coming into the country. How do we balance having both in the congregation that you need to take care of and the newcomers?
Well, fortunately, or unfortunately, as you look at it, I'm not a pastor of a local congregation, so I deal with that less. However, as I think about balance in general, because we all have to kind of figure out a balance between things, I don't know, my immediate response, and I'll let others speak into it, but my immediate response is if you are a pastor of a church, then you have a collection of people who can help shoulder all of the load of those things. And if we're training, equipping our parishioners to do the offices and the work of the church, then it's not falling primarily on Pastor Joshua, but is falling on the collective group. I think the other thing that I'm finding is, because I'm not a pastor of a local congregation here, I want to partner well with other diaspora people here in our city. And so I'm always looking for ways for, how can I help you empower this person, right? So even if they're not yet a believer, they have an opening or an opening for a job opportunity, or they know the best place to go for this thing. And so I'm trying to connect those two people together. I think I in the beginning undersold how important, like, me being a connection point in there. Like, you feel like if you give that away, then like I'm out of the equation. Well, if that's true, okay, great. Like, Lord be with him. I'm sure that he'll take care of him. But really what happens is, like, I'm still the connection point there. And now there's like two people who now share a connection point with me. And so it's not like I'm going to be lost out of the equation. And even if so, okay, Lord, take care of him. But if not, I'm still in the midst of it. And so I think just by being the playmaker, the point guard, whatever sport you want to choose, I think is a good way to go about that. Whether you are working with a church or working with a group of diaspora in general.
Yeah, that's a great question.